Michelle?
Daniel,
OG
OG
Rose.
Rose, and today, what are you thinking about?
I didn't expect it to happen in that what's the
What's
word?
either
What's the word?
tone
Yeah,
or
like the tone
pitch?
or cadence or
What
the
you
cadence
thinking
really.
about?
Yeah.
There's a different tone and pitch.
But
Yeah,
I can still
yeah.
understand what you're
What are you
asking,
thinking
babe.
about? What are you thinking about?
Well, thank you, babe. Oh, it's because usually what you been thinking about, Michelle?
Oh
Like
yeah,
as yeah.
I came at a different angle. What you thinking about? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. What are you thinking
Keep me
about?
on my toes.
Yeah.
Thank you, babe. Yeah, well, I guess I've been thinking about a couple different things, but I've been thinking about um well, just distinctions between basically teaching and activation.
Mm,
Um, what's the difference? How to go about doing that? If you're going to do teaching, what does that look, or what is, or like if we're doing teaching, what is teaching? Why is it important? What kind of historical moment are we in regarding teaching? What is activation, and how does that happen? I do think there is a different like quality to both of them. And we talked a little bit about this off screen, but it does seem that activation is going to include teaching, but teaching doesn't always include activation.
mhm,
And I think everybody resonates with that and can understand that almost just from like an anecdotal experiential level, where you know what it's like to be activated, but you
mm,
also know what it's like to be taught something that you just need to learn, and then now you know the information, right?
right.
Um, activation is completely different, and that's interesting. I mean, I guess just to be clear from the get-go, it we do need both. I mean, teaching is going to be a part of life too. But activation does seem to be really important. And I don't want to say like more important, but I want to say that it's probably, I don't know, in terms of being fully human, it seems pretty essential.
Mhm, mhm,
Um, but it also feels a bit more mysterious, like teaching feels a bit more safe, but it
mhm,
also risks alienating, right?
mhm,
Or just a normal thing of, somebody's teaching from their of experience, but somebody else doesn't know that yet. Kind of like you don't know what you don't know. So then you're going to have to sort of either give them the benefit of the doubt that what they're teaching you does matter and is true because you haven't experienced it yet. So if you don't, or if it's being too heavy handed, then you can kind of reject it like, oh, like I'm always
mm,
being kind of taught like teaching can sometimes make people feel like they can't figure it out themselves, right? So I have to
mhm.
teach you this. So yeah, there's a lot of different modes of teaching. I mean, I think there could be, the best teaching is going to hopefully do something that would be akin to activation or inspiration or something like that. But then there's also teaching that's just, I don't know, kind of I want to say like the bland teaching, but just like what is teaching? Okay, the very basic definition. And there's a need for that. And then there's the teaching that then becomes almost counterproductive, where like you're trying to teach and it's almost making a person like not want to listen or not want to learn. And that's unfortunate, but it happens. So anyway, that's some thoughts, and I can send it your way. But I do think it's very interesting to think about the distinctions. And I will say really quick, then I also was thinking about the conversation you and Jacob Kashir had on facilitator, like
Mm.
teaching versus facilitation, and maybe how that could be worked into our conversation today too. So yeah, I'll send it back to you, Daniel.
Yeah, I mean,
Thanks for
it's
asking.
interesting because, as we were talking about, there's teaching of which makes someone, it's like they're activated, like they can see differently. I
Mhm.
mean, I think it's tied to desire from last week.
Mm,
When a person's activated, they desire what they're being taught. Like some
mm.
desire is activated by the teaching,
I mean, week
right?
before last, our one talk, last
Yeah,
week was
on
motivation.
desire. Yep, 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 yep.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the motivation is also related to it,
Yeah,
though, of
well,
course.
motivate. I guess for me, all of those, as you're speaking,
Mm,
motivation is tied to desire, and
hmm
so they
hmm
all go together. But there's something about activation that is when you learn something that activates you.
hmm
Your desire is kindled by the learning.
hmm
You
hmm
want to do something now. Um,
mm.
y- there's
Well,
some.
and like almost pushing that to a drive,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. That's right. There's something about I think a lot of times there's this kind of idea that it's good to be educated, democracy needs an educated
Mm-hmm.
populace, and so on and so forth. But really, it needs an activated
Yeah.
populace. But we don't know how to activate, so we just teach
hmm
information,
hmm hmm
right? Um, I would argue there is something about philosophizing your life that is moving from teaching to activation.
Yeah.
And to put it very generally, activation seems to be when you've been taught how to teach yourself and you
Mhm.
want to teach yourself. You say, for example, you're learning philosophy, and then there's suddenly this moment where you go, "Oh my gosh, this matters,"
Yeah.
and you see it everywhere.
Yeah.
Like you see the consequences everywhere, right?
Mhm.
There's a difference between learning the history of philosophy and that moment, that moment where suddenly you go, boom, oh my
Mm.
goodness, this is about my life. And
Yeah.
actually it really matters. So
Yeah.
stakes suddenly come into the picture. There's this moment where what you're learning suddenly brings stakes.
Mm.
And there suddenly also brings a feeling, also, though, it's stakes. So there can be the paralysis that is the feeling of stakes
Yeah.
and not knowing what to do.
Oh, yeah.
Right? But activation seems to be you go, wow, this matters, and I know what to do, and there are stakes, and I want to do it. And it all aligns,
Absolutely.
all
Yeah.
in the same moment, right? And you also, I think activation brings a feeling of, I know what to do, but I need to do it to get good at it. There's like a
Mm.
skill element to it. Where with teaching, like let's say you learn the history of
Mhm.
Holland or something like that.
Mhm.
Well, it doesn't activate you to go train a skill, right? But activation has something where now I'm going to get better, right?
Mhm.
It's almost like a video game. I'm going to be the best Pokemon trainer. I'm going to be the best at Street Fighter or something, right? So
Mhm.
it activates. Like it's just very interesting where activation seems to be what you know what you need to do, but knowing what you need to do, well, knowing what needs to be done is not the same as doing it.
Mhm.
Whereas when I learn about European history, I'm just using that example today, that's really kind of all there is to it. Like I don't know what to do with the European history, right?
Oh, no.
I don't know how to get better at Europe. I could become a
Interesting.
PhD
Hmm.
specialist, right? But
Mhm.
the whole idea of say the pattern method is the idea is you're being taught how to teach yourself piano, right? And once you see the patterns, then you go, "Oh my goodness, I see it." And now you know what to do and to get better at those patterns. But it's
Mhm.
not like the knowledge the knowledge of what you need to do brings with it a feeling of what to do and how to do, and you want to do that thing.
Mm.
Whereas, obviously learning European history can activate some people. They want to become scholars and experts, and now they know what to do. They go and get a PhD and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
I think for most of history, activation has been very mysterious. We don't know why something is. I guess that's why I'm tying it to desire and motivation
And the
because yeah, the
mysterious
mystery of
motivation,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Of
yeah,
course,
because
definitely.
we don't know how to activate it. But
Yeah.
you can see clear as day the difference between someone, I'll throw it back to you, between someone who has simply been taught something
Yeah.
and someone who has been activated by something. And
Absolutely.
I do think there is something about philosophy that helps move what you've been taught into activation because you
Mhm.
figure out how to apply it. You figure out how it matters. Um, you figure out how certain ideas can help you avoid entrapment. We talked about entrapment, right?
Mhm.
Versus others. And if you realize the stakes of entrapment, that alone activates you to avoid it,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
But if it's a purely negative vision, that may not be too good. But activation seems to be this blend between a positive vision but also self-defense and desire and all of
Mhm.
these together. I'd be
Mhm.
curious what's coming up for you.
Yeah, no, that's really good. It made me think of two things where it's kind of like two different types of knowledge,
Mm,
right? When it's the teaching mode, like you said, you feel very certain within it, right? It's like, okay,
mhm,
here's what you need to know. Here's the facts about, the defenestration of Prague, right? Like
yep,
just think about European history. Um, Here's all the stuff you need to know, and then you know how you're going to be tested too. For the
right,
most part, this is a test. This is what it's going to look like. There's going to be a multiple choice section, and then there's going to
right,
be an essay section, and like you really within it, it's pretty simple. Like you know what to do. However, that knowledge, like unless it is a moment of activation. So okay, there are people who are gonna
mhm,
maybe get activated by that. Now, did they need to do it that way? Could they have just done it by happening to see a book about
mhm,
European history and then reading through it? Like,
mhm,
did it take a teacher? Was it and some people will talk about that, it's always like an English teacher, right, at school, not
mhm,
really always, but
mhm,
who was really excited, or a history teacher who was
mhm.
really passionate, and that kind of got somebody like, oh wow, like seeing it with new eyes or whatever. So
It
it
would be curious to explore those moments
yeah.
because sometimes people becoming a specialist can be tied to they're in an environment where they have to make money somehow. So, how many people are activated by the study of European history who don't have to get a job to pay for bills? That's a
Mm,
question,
yeah.
right? And how many people who are activated? There seems to be a different, like, how many people, the test is always what they do in their free time, right?
Yeah.
Like, what do they do when they don't have to do anything? Do
Mm,
they read European history? That seems to be evidence
mhm.
of activation. And I do question how much of that can be achieved simply by information and learning. You probably need the teacher who's excited, or who makes you see, oh my goodness, these cycles of history are actually things we're in. But there's a moment of activation that occurs that, yeah, it does seem like English teachers sometimes can do. There's kind of the story is English teachers do it very often, or
Yeah.
can do it more often,
Yeah,
perhaps.
I guess I bring that up because thinking about how we were talking last night or last time on motivation with systems and everything like that. Because somebody could say, well, because activation can happen through
Yeah.
systematic teaching,
Yeah.
that justifies like
Yeah.
that it
Hmm.
is the way to
Sure.
to become activated. Now, I will say yes, possibly, and the only thing is that even through the activation of a passionate teacher, which I do think there's a place for, and that's wonderful. Um, it may how do I put this? It's difficult to know how that activation can lead to something with outside of the system,
Right.
which is not necessarily bad because maybe the system again
Yeah.
will
Yeah.
create a nice
Yeah.
pathway there for you. Now, I think we are running into a lot of issues in terms of being like being almost an adjunct professor hell
Yeah.
kind of thing
Yeah.
where you're stuck there and you're like I want to be able to do something more than just be adjunct.
Mm-hmm.
So there are some real issues systematically with that, but um, I do also think though that I guess I'm just trying to think about how it's that's all very great except that it because the original point I was going to say is that type of knowledge is great for that, but it really doesn't necessarily allow you to know yourself, like in the sense of you might actually start to know that, oh, I do get excited about this thing when I learn that thing, or I get that does seem to pique my interest, and those are things that do help you to start to understand
Mm-hmm.
yourself and what you need to do. But again, the praxis has a limitation because of the form.
Mm-hmm.
So that praxis is of what you now need to do because you know yourself a little better but don't know yourself fully, like
Mm-hmm.
in the visibility of yourself, might be a little bit limited. Now it will still work pretty well, I think. But the I guess I'm just thinking about the activation from people who are outside of the system
Mm-hmm.
and how what I see happening there is that that activation is a bit more like I don't know how to put it. It's like because it's already outside of the system, it's a little bit more open. Like
Mm-hmm.
the possibilities feel a bit more broad here and like
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more um yeah, just sort of thinking about how what you're going to then be activated to do is really there's a lot more clarity on what it means for your adult life, not just, a life in a particular educational type system.
Yeah. Well.
Now, I don't know, maybe I'm making a distinction that doesn't quite exist, but I think I'm just trying to get to the weeds of activation within a system and activation outside of a system
Sure.
because I do think they happen in both places. Teaching happens inside and outside of systems, but yeah.
The nature of systems, though, is to basically remove activation because it doesn't add value, or it can be a threat. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah. And that's true because it's like you do get the people who have those stories about the wonderful history
yeah,
teacher, da,
yeah.
da, but it's I don't and I mean maybe it's like that's enough. That's enough. That's good, right? But there's also a lot of people who didn't necessarily get the activation that happens within that. And also you'd have to ask, did the activation that happened in whatever 6th grade or something,
Hmm.
how is it carrying into your 32-year-old life? Like it would be interesting to think that because that would be helpful to know about the quality of that type of
I mean,
activation.
there's a few questions. There's the question of to what degree are activated people in their very activation eager to join the system because they believe that will further their
Exactly.
activation,
Yes.
or to what degree
And activate others, right? Activate others.
or to what degree, though, is it kind of a tragic trade-off where you
Mm-hmm.
say, "I've got to pay bills," and there's
Mm-hmm.
a coordination problem
Mm-hmm.
where basically for most of history, if you love English, the only way to get paid is to become a university professor, which I
Or an
would
English
argue,
teacher,
yeah,
high
I would
school or
argue the system, though, has basically take advantage of activated people to then
mm-hmm.
get them with their great motivation to get embedded into a system, and they have to publish till they die, and they do a lot of free labor as an adjunct or whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
they don't get paid adequately. Like
Mm-hmm.
I do think activation occurs in the system, but to some degree, I think the system typically it's random and it typically exploits it. And also at universities, if you're an activated person, um, there's activation where you want to share because you genuinely believe it's going to better other people's lives. Typically, universities are more interested in research than teaching. So,
Mm-hmm.
someone activated in teaching, that's not necessarily going to be smiled at. you know?
Mm-hmm.
And furthermore, someone who's activated tends to be activated in a very specific niche way.
Yeah.
And that's going to be killed by the grant system or the incentives
Mm-hmm.
of the institution. That particular thing you're passionate about
Mm-hmm.
may not exactly be where the money's at or
Yeah.
the missions of the alignment. So I mean, there's always this question. So also too, when you have the passionate teacher in the system, the question is, to what degree were they activated by the system, or
Mm-hmm.
were they activated accidentally by the system in a
Mm-hmm.
non-essential way and are in the system, right?
Yeah.
I think most of the time it's pretty, it's pretty accidental.
Yeah.
I think there are s- systems that are more like art forms that basically, like listening to the alpha schools, they're kind of basically focused on the teacher as a
Mm-hmm.
facilitator
Mm-hmm.
to get the kid to be active and to teach themselves and to
Mm-hmm.
create intrinsic motivation,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I mean, a lot of what we're describing is how does someone get drive and intrinsic motivation,
Yeah.
right? So the reason, though, why the distinction between teaching and activation can be useful
Mm-hmm.
is because that's a pedagogical distinction.
Mm-hmm.
There's a form of teaching that is more like people are now activated. And it's tied to like inspiration, but
Yeah.
inspiration can sometimes have a fleeting sort ofness
Mm-hmm.
to it,
Mm-hmm.
but they're activated in that they see it
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. It's like they now kind of go, oh my gosh, like I have a sense of what I ought to do. I guess I want to say activation has some sort of prioritization that
Mm-hmm.
occurs.
Mm-hmm.
There's some sort of sense of priorities now,
Mm.
or a sense of
Okay.
what I should focus
What I
on
should
in
really
order
focus
to
on.
accomplish this thing,
Mm.
right?
And sorry.
Please.
Well, and that's why the teaching model, even though it can't afford relations of activation, it's very like it's very certain about what you should do with the information about European history and take the
Mhm.
test and know how to do good with that. But really, it does not equip you for the other type of knowing in the activation land, which is, oh, what should I prioritize? Oh, what should I actually be, you know, doing with my life, not just like
Maybe
with the subject material.
a way to put it
Hmm.
is, it does not seem to me as if the average history teacher knows how to teach in such a manner that then the
Mm.
kids are going to go and read history in their free time.
Like where the majority
Yeah, the
are.
majority
Yeah,
are,
yeah,
right, where they're activated, right?
yeah. Yeah, yeah,
That
yeah.
because that seems to be the mysterious thing.
Hmm.
Like the ideal is, of course, to have
Hmm.
people go read on their own or talk,
Like, wow, this
like
is so cool. I want to
yeah,
watch
and to
like.
bring it up with their friends. Like
Hmm.
a teacher, we don't seem to know how to teach, quote unquote, in
Hmm.
such a manner where now people are going to be talking about history with their friends,
Hmm.
at IHOP or something like that,
Yeah.
right? And that's like the difference between teaching and activation. I think I also want to say
Hmm.
often teaching is priority indifferent because you've got credits. You got to get X credits in order to get your degree. Well, you just pick some random. I mean, it's actually kind of crazy in some respects, the
Hmm.
system. You just pick basically random like your life, your degree and your GPA and all that is set up by some random question like what classes are available, which ones fill the requirements, what's going to get your credit. Oh, you picked one of the oh, you didn't know which professor to pick. Sorry, you're going to get a B and your life trajectory is different now. I mean, it's pretty random and crazy. And it's all just kind of based on a coordination problem. Most of the time, the incentives in school, it's not really activation, it's fulfilling the credits, like fulfilling the requirements. And the
Yeah.
same goes with PhDs. I
Yeah.
mean,
And that,
uh,
but that's the thing, that's great when you're in that because you're like, you know how to do that. As soon as you're not in it though, now you're trying to get this knowledge that because it's the
perhaps
same.
the difference is that in teaching, the motivation is external. Like, well, in teaching, the direction is external. Like it tells you what to do. Where in activation, it's an internal
Oh,
direction. Yeah,
1000%. I
please.
think that's fair. Yeah, I think that's a very fair distinction between the two.
Hmm.
And I think that again, this type of knowing is what you get trained to be able to
Yeah.
identify as
Yes.
knowing, so you
Yes.
feel comfortable with that in
Yes.
that, and you don't have to always develop the muscle of how do you know when you don't know.
Yeah.
Like it's a well, how do you know what you don't know? Kind of that
Hmm.
sort of thing. Because I think activation actually is linked more to that,
Yes.
where it's this. Wait a second. I know I have something within me that can learn, that can be lit up, that can go as long as I can be able to be open enough to realize that one, there are things that I don't know that I don't know, but maybe I could learn by being more like by having an openness to that. And that's why I think when I said about this, like breadth or more broad and or more possibilities in the activation outside of systems. Why I'm saying that is because often I think that can happen because you have really people who are doing seeking out activation or giving activation. Um, they're also that's for people who are like open to it, you know.
Mhm.
And I think that's also why it may be um, like when people are seeking, it's almost like the scripture, right? You seek and you will find. Like you're going to, if you're opened up to looking at stuff that's different, right? Or like not in the system, then you are going to have a greater ability to be activated.
Yep. Yep.
And that's why like activators kind of have to just patiently like wait for
Sure.
like
Sure.
I'm not saying
Sure.
they can't go and they can create stuff because people actually are seeking it, but you also can't activate somebody who's not open to being active. I don't know that you can, how to put
Sure.
this.
But then there's also where people don't know that they don't know that they're not
Yeah,
open for a
maybe
reason.
that's the benefit of the teaching actually, or the activation that could potentially happen in the realm of systematic things. Because
Hmm.
like, well, I didn't know that I could be activated by history or something
Well,
like
the
that.
benefit of the college is increasing the probability of bumping into something
Hmm. Hmm.
that would activate something you didn't know could be activated.
Yeah,
The issue is it's been captured by, incentives, institutional
yeah, yeah.
incentives, and that's why the big deal with the social coordination mechanism is it increases the probability of the average person being activated by something,
Hmm.
bumping into. It's all about the bumping into,
Yeah,
right? And I guess as you're speaking, activation, because we talk often about intrinsic motivation.
yeah.
So activation seems to be a term that's really drawing attention to what occurs like phenomenologically in the
Hmm.
moment
Hmm.
of intrinsic motivation,
Hmm.
right? Where you're activated, right?
Yeah.
Because there's this way in which it's like, oh, just be intrinsically motivated, just drive. And we talked about environments activating things,
Hmm.
insight, the penny drop, the
Hmm.
Zwiggly, Gestalt, right? So you're activated when you have that insight. You're activated when you apprehend this
Hmm.
something.
Yeah.
And that seems to be the moment of intrinsic motivation. But what occurs when you are, what do you experience when you're intrinsically motivated? Like,
Hmm.
what
Hmm.
do you experience,
Hmm.
right? I mean, it's one thing to stand on the outside and say that person's intrinsically motivated, but what is that person experiencing,
Hmm.
right? I think it's a combination of a feeling of I know what to prioritize. So let's just take the music example.
Okay.
Like, for me, teaching music via these are the sheet music. I'm going to teach you how to read the music, and
Hmm.
we're going to practice. There's this feeling of I don't know how to teach myself, but I do know how to put myself under this music teacher, and they're going to teach me what I need to know,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
But the issue for me is I don't consider that activation.
Hmm.
What I hope to do with the pattern method is you see this L, if you play in this L, then you can improv all day long and it will sound good.
Hmm.
And then you'll get quicker and quicker, and then you
Hmm.
can flip the L and you
Yep.
can move. So what you're trying to do is make them go, oh,
Yep. Yep.
and now they know to prioritize this. Like it also, they could go learn sheet music, they could go
Yeah.
learn those things,
Sure. Sure.
but it gives them a sense of the priority is this. And
Mm.
once they build the confidence, then they can go that if they want to.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a kind of negation that occurs, a kind of
Hmm.
bracketing out things that empowers you. I guess I want to say that there's something about intrinsic motivation that has a certain bracketing out actually,
Hmm.
where you bracket out like you become intrinsically motivated to read literature because you also kind of have this feeling of what you don't need to read.
Hmm.
There's a negation that occurs in activation. There's a certain simplification that occurs, but in that simplification, you more effectively get at the whole.
Hmm. Hmm.
Actually,
Hmm.
like it's simple in the theological tradition. There are
Hmm.
no it's simple in
That's,
the theological tradition, which is there are no extensions.
yeah.
Like in that moment of intrinsic motivation, there's a simplicity
Yeah.
that is the thing you need to do to get the whole, to get the gestalt, to get all the essential
Hmm.
information. And it feels free of extension, I
Hmm.
almost want to say. Where in learning, it feels like just you're extending another subject, another
No,
subject. There's
yes,
never
yes.
this feeling of
Mm.
simplification,
Mm.
please.
No, that's good. It makes me think of this article that I guess she goes by Diary of a Moon Girl on Substack. But yeah, it's a great. I enjoyed learning from uh, this girly who I guess stumbled across through kind of the Corey network. But basically, yeah. Um, uh, so basically, she wrote this article about beauty and like beauty in the sense of how you perceive yourself. And she said that I thought this one line was so good. I mean, the whole article was very good. I would recommend reading it. But she said something like, "Less was never about subtraction; it was always an invitation."
Yep.
And I
Yeah.
thought that
Yeah.
was really good. Where it's, yeah, in a sense, it's about less, because she was, yeah. Again, go read it. It's a good piece, really good piece. But it's it's not just about it being that, it's not like a lesson in a kind of scarce way. It's a simplification, like you're saying, less in the theological way, in a simplification way, so that you can actually be invited like with the
Yeah.
pattern method for,
Activation has an
yeah, it's
invitation.
extremely invitational, and it is about simple, it's
Yeah.
simplicity, that then you're like, oh my gosh, I can do this, I literally can do this. It's very, now you have to actually do it, but you can do it, and you feel that sense of hope, that sense of, like, again, I mean, for lack of a better word,
Mm,
you feel the activation, you
yeah.
feel the energy, the ability to act and to know what to do. um and yet there's still a lot of, well, the nature of improvisation. So with the Daniel Garner pattern method, it's like you still don't know exactly what you're going to play, but that's kind of the fun of it now. It's
Hmm.
the fun of, like, playing around and figuring out the sounds and listening to it and actually perceiving what you're playing and all of that.
Hmm.
So yeah, I thought that was a great line and a great point. And I think a lot of times the teaching model is really just like, let's add more knowledge, let's add more knowledge, let's add more knowledge, never minding the fact that a lot of that knowledge is not remembered. um, and the whole point of, like, isn't memory like such a big deal to I don't
Bergson.
know,
Bergson.
to Bergson, yeah,
Yeah.
for Bergson, but
Yeah.
also, like, I mean, it's Aristotle. I mean,
Augustine.
yeah, like
All.
all of
Yeah.
the great
No.
thinkers. I
Yeah.
mean, it's
Yeah. Yeah.
huge. And I love this other part of a Diary of a Moon Girls piece, where she was like, she was actually remembering that she already could identify beauty. She was saying, like, I remember the way that, and she listed three examples. It was basically like how, her aunt's eyes lit up when she would laugh, and then the other, or smile, and then the one was about, like, her, maybe a babysitter's freckles, like, wrinkling, like how her
Hmm.
face would get so, her smile would get so big when she laughed. And then the third example was about a pregnant woman's body and how comfortable she was in just her expansion and
Hmm.
of new life. And those are not the words. So again, read the article, and I might not be remembering the examples exactly, but the point of the matter is she was saying the word remember, remember, remember. And what's so cool is that what it shows is that she had this in like, this is what activation is all about, right? It's like you can only, um like, it's there's an ember and it's getting blown on, right?
Yep.
It's like activation has to make connection with something in you for it to be go bing, and
Yep.
then you can move forward with it. And so what I'm saying is, like, there's an interesting thing about, there's a lot of emphasis on memory practice in teaching, which I get where it's coming from, because the memory is important, but kind of in what way? Because a lot of times, if you only do the addition without this almost apathetic less is more kind of concept, then you don't, in like the theological simplicity that then is invitational, you may forget to how to remember in the right way. Like, you start to, you don't remember what you actually already knew as beauty,
Hmm.
right? So then you use the mask, or you use what's everything else is telling you to add onto your face and add onto this and it's really like, because you're, and then you have to, like, oh, remember what are the steps, like, there's a lot of remembering there too, but it's a different type of remembering. And so anyways, I just thought that was kind of interesting, and I thought I would bring it up here because I thought it was neat to what you were saying on less and simplicity, and then remembering. So thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's something because there's this huge question
Hmm.
on how do you get intrinsic motivation?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you get
Yeah.
activation?
Yeah.
And activation could perhaps be the language of the moment the teacher or the
Activator.
mentor, the activator,
Right.
facilitator. The goal of in my opinion, the goal of the teacher should be to activate. Like always. Like always.
Mm.
That's your goal. Not to just give them information to
Hmm.
get a job. The goal of the teacher in this sense is to be a facilitator. And
Hmm.
facilitator can, we can use words in different ways, but ultimately a facilitator is going to have to entail teaching, right? And teaching, when done right, has an activation
Mm.
that is going. However, it's like, well, we don't know how to do that. It's random, right? So, but
Hmm.
if it's random, we have a problem.
But
Uh,
that's funny because, sorry, it's so
please.
funny to me because I'm hearing like a lot of the same words in different, like, so, we talked about, what to do for the test with the European history, but then you also were saying how activation makes you know what to do, what
Yeah.
to do next.
Hmm.
But it's a
Hmm.
different type of knowing.
Yeah.
Now here too, you had said it's kind of random, right? You just
Mm.
get this type of teacher,
Hmm.
you have to get these core
Hmm.
requirements. That's a different type of randomness
Yes.
to the randomness now we're talking about in activation,
Yes.
which is more like it's funny. It's actually again, it's a different type of it's kind of makes me think of confidence versus certainty.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
it's a randomness that then you start to get a confidence in being able to still know what you need to do. Now, in terms of like, yeah, when we assess it from empirical, like it's hard. That's where the randomness is assessed onto activation, where it's like, if you've never really been a facilitator of activation or received activation, it's very easy to look at that and be like, that was luck.
Yep.
Yeah, wow,
Right.
that was kind of like wow,
Yeah.
and that's in a sense it is kind of cool and magical and mysterious. But there's also something about it where the cultivation of well, maybe even just giving a framework and a language to it is also helpful. But there is a way to cultivate activation, um, a- in the sense of like that's why yes, you can still call it random in a good way, but the randomness to dismiss it, oh, that's random, so we shouldn't even do that,
Mhm.
that's actually not legitimate because there are ways to
But
cultivate
but that
activation.
is what the system has genuinely been doing,
Yeah, yeah,
and I think the system
because
would
it's
argue it has no
scary.
well, it would
Yeah.
argue it has no choice at
Uh-huh.
scale, because it has to serve everyone.
Sure.
It can't predict who will be activated by what.
And what if they're activated by something that
That's
yeah,
computational explosiveness, as
yeah.
Vervaeke may say. Therefore, tough luck. Good luck. I hope you do get activated, but the system can't really address it.
Yeah.
Um, now, does that mean it is impossible to address? Well, that's what we're exploring, and I
Yeah.
would argue the whole point of the social coordination mechanism is to actually make us able to deal with problems that historically we've not been able to deal with because we haven't had the mechanism of environment customization and building or social coordination that the technology affords.
Yeah.
But so now things are different. But how to use that mechanism, nevertheless, can be better aided and better explored if we get really down and kind of examining what is the phenomenological difference, like what is going on
Mhm.
in the distinction between activation and teaching, because then you, as the facilitator, would kind of have a better sense of what you need to do to increase the probability of activation, right?
Mhm.
As opposed to saying, well, it's random, so I'm not even going to worry about a pedagogy to
Yeah, yeah,
activate
yeah.
because it just seems random,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Now, of course, traditionally, the probability of activation is one-on-one tutoring. Like there's many writers and thinkers who get onto this. Like aristocratic tutoring, historically speaking, has the highest likelihood of activation.
Mm.
And some people say, well, AI one-on-one teacher, therefore we're finally going to have the dream. Because you could argue, I mean, I think many educators have gestured toward the dream of education being a world where every child is activated. Like that's what they mean when they say educated. Like I think when a lot of people say we want everyone to be educated,
Educated.
they mean they want everyone to be kind of activated,
Mhm.
really. Um, Now with time, the word takes on different flavors, but I
Yeah.
think that is the ideal. But we've given up on it, or we've accepted that it requires one-on-one tutoring, and the dream is that AI would be able to help with that.
Mm.
And maybe it would, but I think the question, even nevertheless, it could also have unintended consequences, as I know Zach Stein talks about. But nevertheless, it could be useful to consider if AI did manage to activate people more better than teachers. We could try to consider what it would be doing in those circumstances by which it achieved that result.
Mm.
Now, a few more things. Like you're making this point on, randomness, but the other side of it,
Yeah.
it's a very large point. Basically, y- everything is going to be involved. Like everything that makes up the world creation, everything is going to be involved. The question is the order and
Mhm.
how,
Yeah.
right? That's why you have to have philosophy. Everything is going to be involved. Randomness is going to be involved somehow. Freedom is going to be in your worldview, your bigger picture. I'm making a very large point. Everything will
Yeah.
be
Teaching will be involved.
yeah,
Activation
everything
will be
like
involved.
using your hands will be involved.
Yeah.
Your life will consist of everything. That's not the question. The question is the order. And the reason you have to philosophize your life is because the order is not self-evident,
Yeah.
and the world will select the order for you, and you'll just stumble into an ordering of everything.
Mhm.
But the likelihood that it is best for human flourishing is very low.
Yeah.
So you have to somehow order all variables
Mhm.
of all things in your life in such a manner that better incubates the person.
Mm.
That's a very large point, but it's getting at why so often in conversations, especially these kinds, there's this idea that oh, there is a role of randomness. It's
Mhm.
just in this way. Oh, there is a role of freedom. Oh, well, it's just in this way. And you're making these
Mhm.
linguistical distinctions. It's
Mhm.
because everything is involved.
Mhm.
It's just a question of order. So
Mhm.
you have to philosophize to figure out the order.
Mhm.
Now, the thing that I want to draw attention to is what seems to be happening in activation is a certain negation, a certain simplification, a certain cutting out to when you get students to see it or you get someone to see it, they feel like this thing actually contains all the stuff you left out. Like you cut out the sheet music, but if you learn the pattern, you feel like you get the sheet music as well.
Mhm.
Right? Like you can't read every book of literature, but if you read this novel by Faulkner in this way,
Mhm.
you actually learn
A mode.
how you learn a mode that is the literary person, that thus opens up all books, right?
Mhm.
That seems to be what happens in intrinsic motivation.
Mhm.
Whereas in teaching has a certain feeling of extension.
Mhm.
You know, you read this book, then this book, and now you have a survey. It's an extension. And of course, extensions are entropic. Simplicity is negentropic.
Yeah.
Simplicity tends to create its own energy, right? The reason why this is very important is because if you're trying to increase the probability of activation in teaching, you want to avoid extension. You want to say, let's really read this book by Faulkner. You pick a book, a particular book. I would pick something like, well, I mentioned Faulkner. The Sound and the Fury would be a great example because it seems like a total mess, and most people when they read it hate it. But I think you can actually activate it. You can help the reader see what's actually going on relatively easily, and when that does it, it's almost a magical experience.
Mhm.
And that sort of experience of a novel opening up that way then goes, well, what other novels could open up this way?
Mhm.
So now
Mhm.
they become skeptical of their own judgment of a book as bad.
Mm.
That's a big deal
Yeah.
because you actually won't be activated until you become skeptical of your own judgment because you don't need to be activated. You know the truth. Activation brings with it a certain sort of I need to do the work,
Mm.
but you also want to do the work.
Mhm.
So that feeling of reading Faulkner has a magic to it.
Mhm.
You're activated because it's really cool to do the work,
Mhm.
actually, right? And actually, now you feel
Mhm.
like you know what novels can do.
Mhm.
Right
Mhm.
now, if I introduce you, like for example, it would probably not be good facilitation to introduce you to Finnegan's Wake because it
Right.
would be too much. Even though I think Bloom is correct that it's a masterpiece,
Right.
but it's too much too soon. I wouldn't introduce Absalom Absalom. I'd start with The Sound and the Fury because it is a book that most people hate when they read, but then when you get it, it's extraordinary,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So there is something to be said about a good facilitator or activator being aware of what books. Be, certain books are better at that moment of wow of grasping than
Mhm.
others,
Mhm.
but the books have this moment of seeming impenetrable or weird or strange.
Mhm.
Like the book, because I'm trying to find the qualities of this moment that activates a person. I think it's tied to when you experience something that strikes you as crazy and weird, and then it opens and you see it as extraordinary, and now you're skeptical of your own judgment,
Mhm.
which
Mhm.
shuts out the world. And activation seems to make you open to the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you're open to it now, and because you're also you know what to do, you feel empowered, not disabled, right?
Exactly.
So there's
Yeah.
something about a good teacher that is able to determine, if it's say literature, and this logic would apply for everything. What is the particular book that I can teach in such a way that will then make them go, oh, and activate an entirely new experience of literature. Because if
Mhm.
instead I say, well, I'm going to teach them Faulkner, then I'm going to have them read Hemingway, and then Flannery O'Connor, that's extension. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
That's an extension logic. And that to me seems really difficult to motivate people because it's entropic, because there's always something else to read. And when will I love literature? It's like, well, you love literature if you read all the books. That's an extension logic.
Mhm.
Like someone who loves literature is someone who has read all the books. What I'm saying is that logic is very problematic because I think someone loves literature when they have that moment of going, "Oh my gosh!" And maybe the only book they've read is *The Sound and the Fury*. They easily love literature more than the person who has read all of the
Mhm.
books. But from a quantitative standpoint, it will seem as if the person who has read Hemingway, Flannery O'Connor, and Faulkner loves literature more than the
Mhm.
person who has just read *The Sound and the
Mhm.
Fury*. But my point is that actually, no, the person who's just read *The Sound and the Fury* may love literature more because they've been activated,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So basically, I think the system
Mhm.
associates being activated with a quantity,
Absolutely.
which that's a mistake.
Yeah.
It's
It's
that
the wrong metric
yeah,
for
the same with
activation.
philosophy. You see this
Yeah.
all the time where someone's read all the philosophers. So you'd say, wow, they love philosophy. No, sometimes the high schooler who has just really gone, whoa, on Descartes or something,
Mhm.
they love it more. And honestly, a lot of the philosophers, like take Zizek as a great example. Zizek is someone who seems uniquely skilled at activating people.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's one of the reasons why people love him
Mhm.
so much, even if you critique him. He has been able to activate more people than most.
Yeah.
And so he's a gifted activator. Studying him, and I think you get into a bunch of, I'll throw it back at you because comedy, wit seem to be part of it. This ability to actually, wow, I thought philosophy was dead, killed by
Mhm.
science, and wow, actually, it's very
Mhm.
relevant. Oh, in fact, it was the thing that I needed to understand my life that
Mhm.
I never considered because I was taught in school that philosophy is a waste of time and all you need is science. And Zizek's helping me see that. Now I'm activated to consider the entire tradition and field, right? So there's something, I guess what I'm just drawing attention to. There is something about a simplicity that is not simplistic, but a skilled, like a teacher that's going to act, or a parent or a
Yeah.
mediator or whoever, what they do, I think, or it's at least to begin, they identify the specific book or the specific skill or the specific way of seeing that is simple in the theological tradition of containing the whole,
Mm.
not simplistic. But what is simple is really hard to determine.
Mhm.
Like, how do you, as the teacher or the facilitator, know? Well, you have to have read all the books. You have to have read all of Faulkner, and then judge which of those texts would be the one that could actually open up literature, right? So there's something here, but then the question is, how does that teacher know, right? Where
Mhm.
did they get it from? Well, they probably bumped into, they probably got lucky, and so then they bumped into a William Wilson, right?
Mhm.
So I guess what I want to say is this is a coordination problem. I'll throw it back to you. This is a coordination
Mhm.
problem.
Mhm.
How do people learn what is the text or the thinker that is simple in the way that it opens up the whole? And I'm happy to expand more on that concept of the simple kind of but that knowledge seems to be something that have been passed down by
Mhm.
great teachers of the past, right? But the issue is that's an ineffective coordination mechanism because you just got to get lucky and have William Wilson, right? A hope I have with the social coordination mechanism is the people who have inherited perhaps
Mhm.
from the system, from people in the system, um, they can now bring it outside the system because this is what I guess this is what I want to say. I think a lot of the activators in the system are almost like Kierkegaardian secret agents. You
Yeah.
know, it's not, they're like secret agents. Like they're in there surviving the bureaucracy, surviving having to, publish
Yeah.
or die. Like they're
Yeah.
survivors, right?
Yeah.
And they're in there because they're like, due to the coordination problem,
Mm.
the only chance I have of perhaps bumping into people willing to listen is in the system, so I'll
Mhm.
survive it.
Yeah.
My experience has not been activators in the system are thrilled by the system. They're like surviving.
Yeah. What
It's a sacrifice. And basically,
Yeah.
I think I guess what I wanted to give credit to these individuals, their sacrifice has enabled there to be people now,
Yes.
2026,
Yeah.
April, March, into March, who have learned the art
Mhm.
of the simple that unlocks intrinsic motivation in a bunch of different fields. And
Yeah.
now they can bring it to the internet. More critically, they can bring it to the social coordination mechanism.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the success of the secret agent mission. I want to say of people in the system. But I do definitely feel that most of the system, the activation that occurs is more like a Kierkegaardian secret agent kind of
Mhm.
thing. But it's now kind of up to us, I would say, our generation, basically, who have had the fortune of a Wilson or, who have inherited
And
sort
that's
of
a
the
that's
knowledge.
a professor who really opened up
Yeah,
your
absolutely. Bailey,
experience
yeah,
of
I've missed
Faulkner.
Bailey. Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just saying, like, because
Yeah,
people may
yeah,
not
yeah,
know the
yeah.
names, but like, these are people who were these like
Yeah.
basically secret agents
And they
within the
pass
system.
down the
Yep.
art. They pass down
Yeah.
the simple, the
Yeah.
secret of the simple, that then we can spread. And until the social coordination
Mhm.
mechanism, there was no way to effectively spread it.
Yeah.
So you would
Well,
fall into the extension trap.
yeah, and maybe the fact that people like do use YouTube to just like learn about the stuff they're interested in already shows you that one, people already have the capacity to be activated,
Yes.
and then two, it can be done. It will be done, whether it's in the system or outside of the system or a combination of both. Even YouTube is a system. So like, I don't, I hate to use it like it's, there's a system and there's everything else because like they're always kind of intertwined,
Sure.
interwoven.
Sure. Sure.
um I do think there's interesting things that like may be at the expense of the potential of activation in both worlds. Like you said, in the kind of more institutional systematic sense, people can get like for example, that point you made, which I thought was so good about, maybe you actually love literature more, even though you've only read Absalon,
Yeah.
Absalon,
Yeah.
because you got lit up and you're like
Yeah.
on fire
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
literature and about
Yeah.
like the ideas
Yeah.
and about
Yeah.
like life and all of that and writing and whatever it is that specifically got you activated in what
Yeah.
it's about. But you know if unfortunately the risk is that even in the moments of that activation, sometimes more institutional systematic things which have these certain telos can make you say, well, but I haven't read as many books as that other
Yes.
person, so I guess I don't love literature or
Yes. Yes.
whatever,
What
and then
happens?
people shut
And
down.
then they shut down.
So so there's a risk for that there. However, there is the potential of that ember to get breathed on, and it can grow. um the risk with things being done outside the system, even though it's still systematic, is that people become hikikomori, and so they really just kind of go into their little pod, as Owen will talk about,
Yeah.
Owen of the Argonaut, and they are essentially never like Ross Birdwell from Patient Kingdom will
Yeah.
talk about. He'll say like nobody people aren't like allowing themselves to just be in the thrownness of
Yeah.
life anymore. Like
Mhm.
just go to the small church or go to the school or whatever it is.
Mhm.
So they're kind of recoiling from that because they see some of the issues with systematic stuff, but then they're also like not always putting themselves in a position to encounter the unexpected or to encounter the other. um, so I guess what I mean to say is like the risk of the unsystematic activation arena is that, again, people might, the problem is they might just get stuck on all of the junk food internet stuff, right? That people can get hooked on, instead of like being like, oh, I learn and then I move, I act with this. I don't just learn to just learn and fill up my head like I was doing all the time. I learn so that I can go, like that I can be a light, that I can be, you know, purposeful and understanding of what I do need to make my priority, and I do it.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm bringing this up because I don't know.
Well,
My brain. Well, sorry. Can I just say, like, my brain keeps thinking about this idea of, um, this idea that people would be able to just have the moment of being activated, and like, is it ultimately just going to basically be kind of left up to chance? Even though I do believe there is a way to cultivate activation and activating, like, because for example you can do that by being activated yourself, like, and demonstrate that for people. Look, and that's what, it's like
yes.
McCarricker will talk about having passionate teachers, right? Like
Yes.
if you're homeschooled, you might not see a passionate teacher, so then you're like, oh, I didn't get that,
Yeah. Yeah.
however, I mean, I think he as an individual is somebody who's passionate about what he's doing, so like you can still cultivate passion. It
Mhm.
just might be through an interesting kind of path. But the point of the matter is, I guess I'm just bringing this up to say, like, is there, so people are trying to make their best decisions in light of technology, in light of AI, in light of like the current historic moment. So when people are like, well, what's going to be the best mode for my kids to be able to potentially have activation moments or whatever,
Yeah.
like, what should I do? So I mean, so
Well,
that's what I'm kind of thinking about it from.
well, I mean, a few things. I mean, first, there has to be an analysis of what is occurring in the moment of activation
Yeah.
and intrinsic motivation, because until you see that, then I think it becomes very difficult to determine the pedagogy, because the
Hmm.
pedagogy, the practice, is going to be tied to what is the environment that, because I think it's a design issue.
Yeah.
You're designing something, right? Um, so
And really quick, I think too, activation is not actually just simply somebody being passionate about a thing.
no,
Actually,
no,
I think it's the transmission
yes,
of a
yes,
particular
it's the
epiphany,
transmission.
skill,
Yes,
and a framework, so that
yes.
you can then be like, oh my gosh, like you're saying, it's an empowering thing. Because I
Well,
know that I was around some passionate teachers, fortunately, as well, and that was exciting. I mean, I was also kind of just like learning anyway, so like I
mhm,
would be excited and passionate about reading some play in English,
uh,
and then I'd be passionate about learning about bullfighting because my Spanish
yeah,
teacher loved
yeah,
bullfighting, even though it was not part of the
yeah,
curriculum. We're
yeah,
watching slides
yeah,
about bullfighting and we're learning the history. It's like, okay, but all of that is great, but and I'm not dogging on that. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. There's something really important about that. However, that maybe isn't actually enough in
no,
terms of
no,
what activation
no.
actually is, because you could also just be left with kind of a menagerie of cool stuff, right? Which is
That's
fine,
yes,
and that's
yes,
okay.
yes,
Maybe you have some good conversational
yes,
stuff you can have with
yes.
people. um but really, in terms of like, how did it activate me to be like more of Michelle and in my own distinct, unique personhood and purpose, that may not be enough, like, in terms of being around passionate people.
Activation is not merely passion.
Yeah,
It,
it's great. It's like a passion. There's a place for that, and it's a beautiful thing. But it's
uh,
just that it's not. And it can also leave people like in this trap of like, well, I'm not passionate about my job, or I'm,
Yes.
passion is that's a whole nother topic we can maybe get into another time. But I do think it's a great concept, but it can often leave people kind of in that place of like paralysis.
I mean, passionate people who can't activate others could be a terrible thing. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, yeah,
that's true because they're like, oh, gee, they really like they're just so
yeah,
happy,
that's
like
why getting
amazing
down
about
what
this stuff.
exactly is active what's going on in activation is really important. Otherwise, an increase of passion could just be make people more sad.
Yeah,
And those people become more unintelligible and you get a cheap delusionism.
yeah,
Activation
yeah.
is tied to some sort of transmission
Transmission.
and some sort of socialization of passion, not
Mm,
just
mm,
individualization. Right now, passion mostly serves individualism,
mm,
and that's not part of the new address. I mean,
mhm,
that's not the question. Is it good to have passion? Yeah. Is it better as an individual to have passion than not? Yes. But sociologically, that's not, I want to say, interesting. Like, not in a judgmental way, but in a sense, it's not sociologically relevant. Because if we can't discuss activation of passion, then it is not a relevant factor to the
that some
social.
people are
Yeah,
passionate.
yeah,
Yeah,
that doesn't tell us anything. It's just
yeah,
an accidental. It's no different than saying some people have blonde hair versus not. It
yeah,
is
yeah,
an accidental description,
yeah.
right? So the question, it would only be a relevant description if you could transfer it. I can't transfer blonde hair. Maybe dye. I mean, you could dye it or something, but not really. I mean, because even if you dye your hair, you're still a brunette or something. But the idea is of transferring it. Like, if we can
Mhm,
kind of
mhm,
distill or discuss meaningfully the transfer of passion or intrinsic
mhm,
motivation,
mhm,
well, now you're talking about something that has social relevance.
mhm,
And that's this question of activation. And right
mhm,
now, basically, teaching, I think, tries to pass on passion, but doesn't know how. And so the question becomes what occurs in the moment when passion is gained can help a teacher or facilitator determine the kind of class they should have, the kind of lessons they can teach that would increase the probability. And
yeah,
and this would apply to life as well with your kids, right?
yeah,
The first characteristic seems to be simple versus extension.
mm,
You're teaching in a way that is focused on the simple, that it's not based on extension.
mm,
If you learn this one simple thing, and that simple thing entails a certain way of seeing.
mm.
It's not merely knowledge. I now see everything differently,
Yes,
right?
yeah,
Like, it changes the quality of all phenomena,
yes.
right? Like, or all music. Like, there are patterns. Bam! Like, all
Mhm,
music is different now,
mhm,
right? And so, oh my goodness, I now have like a skeleton key.
mm,
There's something about simple and skeleton key
mhm,
that
mhm.
go together. I now have a skeleton key by which to approach everything
Yes.
that I get at the beginning, not at the end of all the extension.
Yeah, like
Because
one
there's
day
the
I'll get it
yeah, because
after
there's
I
kind of this feeling. So there's kind of this feeling that once I read enough books, I'll get the skeleton key. The argument I am making is that is not true. You never by extension arrive at a simplicity.
mhm,
You never by extension arrive at a skeleton key. Okay. So if that's the case, you need to change your classroom right now.
mhm,
Extension is not quantity is not going to work.
yeah.
But if I give you a skeleton key, I promise you're going to read more books than anyone else. That's always the joke,
Mhm,
right? But the
mhm,
extension is accidental to the simplicity. It's not essential for the skeleton key. Like, what happens is when you have the skeleton key, now I think you'll play more music, you'll read more books than anyone, but not to get the skeleton key, but because you're activated
mhm,
by the skeleton key and you want to read all the different
mhm,
books,
mhm,
right? So you start with a simplicity that activates everything. That simplicity is a negation. So you also brought up memory. So the main problem is the school mostly treats memory as recollection. So you can make a
mhm,
distinction here
mhm,
between
mm.
remembering and
Remembering.
recollection.
That's good.
And Jotham will also make this point. So recollection is collecting. I'm recollecting. I'm
Yeah.
re-summoning what I've collected.
Yeah,
Right.
here's my
That's a
collection.
logic of extension.
Mhm,
I have a
mhm,
lot of things in my head that are extended everywhere. I need to remember them. I need to
mhm.
bring them back. Right. And then
Recollect them and
recollect them and then throw it away and get the next trivia question and the next trivia. There's this recollect. You collected it once. The teacher taught it to you. Collected, then you forgot it,
mhm,
but you need to get to the place where you can recall it,
mhm,
recollect it during the test. But this is all just a logic of extension.
mhm,
Okay. Remembering tends to be where you don't lose track of the skeleton key because it's easy to forget that what you need is it's easy to forget the simplicity.
mhm,
We make ourselves busy. We add a bunch of things we don't need.
mhm,
We do a bunch of stuff we don't need to do,
mhm,
actually. And we do a bunch of stuff we don't need to do precisely often maybe to increase our resume or to increase our status or whatever, but ironically that makes us more entropic. It's more draining. It
Mhm,
requires more energy, so
mhm,
we do less,
mhm,
actually. Simplicity has this way of getting down to the main thing, of
mhm,
which you remember, oh, the main thing contains the whole thing.
mhm,
Oh, right, if I just remember these patterns that actually contain and then the question is, what is the whole thing?
mhm,
The whole thing is the eternity, and what that means is the whole thing is the movement of the realization of the whole. And so let me explain that. So, say in the pattern method, when you remember the pattern, that contains the information of which can inspire you to go through the entire journey of music through time.
mhm,
Okay, so
mhm,
it contains the whole in that it has
mhm,
what it needs to propel you through the whole. Right,
mhm,
you can
mhm,
experience the whole now. Like another way is the simple is is everything super compressed. It's super compressed, and then time is the opening of the zip file. Your
mhm,
life becomes an opening of the zip file, but you
mhm,
don't have to add anything. You just need to open it. There's no extension. You're just
mhm,
opening like a
mhm,
lotus
mhm.
flower.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay? So the simple intrinsic motivation is this feeling of an opening of a lotus flower.
Mm,
Okay?
mhm,
Whereas extrinsic motivation is an extension, adding, and you're just trying to keep via willpower the
mhm,
process of adding another
mhm,
book,
mhm,
waiting for the skeleton key day, and it never arrives. So
mhm,
you're never activated. And you're just taught another book. You're taught another book, and you're taught another book. It's the logical list. It's
mhm,
just a list.
mhm,
So you're never activated
mhm,
because you're worn down by energy. But the simple and is where you remember, oh yeah, this contain I don't need to add anything because this contains
mhm,
everything.
mhm.
Remembering is a certain not losing focus on the lotus flower,
Yeah,
like not losing focus on the thing that unfolds.
yeah.
Whereas these other things do not unfold.
Mhm,
And yet when they unfold, they get included as well, because eventually the unfolding
mhm,
unfolds into them as well. That's what intrinsic
mhm,
motivation
mhm,
does,
mhm,
right? So it's negentropic in
mhm,
that sense. So activation as a focus means what you're trying to do is and you could also and not all books do this equally. Not
mhm,
all philosophers do this equally. Not all
mhm,
artists do this as equally. But there are some artists, and perhaps this is what we mean when we say the greats, right? Like
yeah,
why are some ranked others that for me, the greatest writers, excuse me, are the ones who achieve this simplicity.
mhm,
That's what makes them great, right? Because they contain within them the possibility of activating someone
mhm,
to the whole
mhm,
of literature, if you will, right? So a great facilitator is able to identify what works are lotus flowers, which works are simple, right? And then and you see, and they use that, and I'll give it back to you. They use that to transfer their passion. Like without the right book, you can't transfer your passion. You can
mhm,
be passionate, you can love literature, but you don't have a way to articulate and transfer that passion to the students or to other people, right? But the right that's also why I mean honestly that's why the wording and articulation of ideas really matter.
yeah.
Because articulation you'll hear the same idea a million times
Yep,
and then
and
you'll hear
somebody
one
says
wording
it.
it bam, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
great
Some
activators,
framework gives
some
it a
framework,
whole. You're like,
whole
oh
new
my
meaning.
gosh,
Now
yeah.
you see it
No,
everywhere.
yeah. Now you're like, why
Yeah,
didn't why
yeah.
didn't I realize this before?
So in the same
And
way that there are some books that activate, they're better than others. There are some articulations that activate better than, and this is why the philosopher, the teacher, really should focus on speaking,
yes, yes,
because the way you say something
yes,
can be the same idea, but not all articulations equally activate.
yes, yes.
And so you hear something go bam,
Mhm,
bam, right? You need to be able to speak, and that is what transfers passion. It's not enough for you to have passion if you can't transfer it via
mhm,
an articulation that makes it go bam, that then
mhm,
boom opens up, right?
mhm,
So that and so good facilitators, good activators are super invested, if you will, in the art of figuring out those articulations,
mhm,
those simplicities that create drive that help you escape the logic of extension
mhm.
and quantification and adding to a list. That's what they're focused on doing.
Yeah.
They're looking on the way to teach music in a manner that has is simple, to teach literature in a way that's simple, philosophy, gardening in a way that is simple,
Mhm,
right? Because then the whole is there. Everything that is needed to go through the journey of the whole is there,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
As opposed to telling you what books you need to read in order to be a
mhm,
literary specialist
mhm.
or something right there.
Yeah.
But I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, no, that's all really good. And it does make me think of that, the kind of aphoristic idea of, you know, te- if you teach a man to fish, he'll be able
Mhm.
to have fish the rest of his life,
Yeah.
right? The first is just like, okay, he's got gave him a fish, right? And
Yes.
then you have to do it again to get the
Yeah.
fish.
Yeah, that's
You
right.
have to keep doing
Extension.
the
There's an
same, yeah. You have
extension
to
now.
keep reading every single book till again, finally feel like you're
Yeah, an expert.
satisfied or
Yeah.
an expert,
Mhm.
or you feel like you can say you whatever,
Yeah.
right? But it's yeah, it's truly this idea of skills, the mode. And I do think you're right that there are particular books. I don't think that should make one feel, how to put this, it's true. So okay, I'm thinking about this in terms of like the skeleton key of how one can resource
I
their
mean, I'm
body.
not saying that you should only read the Skeleton Key books, but I am saying you should start with them.
Well, yeah, one,
And a
I mean,
teacher should start you with them.
when an activator is going to be able to know that we can take this book and we can go ahead and demonstrate the mode through this book.
Yes.
And even if there's an antithesis to it where it's like, this one actually didn't demonstrate that, we could use this to show how this doesn't demonstrate a mode of literature or something like that.
I mean,
Like, I
if you
guess.
catch the fire from the activating book, the teacher is like, the other ones you'll just come to. You know, you'll just come to, and if you don't, that's fine because you
Mhm,
can't read everything,
mhm,
right? So if you
mhm,
focus on the activation,
mhm,
the rest, first things first, you get second things as well.
mhm. Yeah, I just think that's really interesting on how thinking about that for, say, the arts, or say like physics. I guess I'm just thinking about this through every single topic. I think what's interesting with, let's say, the body and, let's say, cellular energy, there are very specific like physiological things and
Yeah.
ecological things that actually have you can repeatable things, like repeatable impacts.
Hmm.
And so in a sense, it's very, there's a beautifully simple formula in a sense for what it means to, um now it's not it's yes, it's simple, but it's also going to be particular. It's going to be specific for a person as well, given like their own like epigenetic background, where
Hmm.
they come from, their lineage, all of the things, the things
Right.
that they love, how they can be in relations, all of that good stuff. Um, so I guess there's always this dimension of the simplicity and the particular, which go hand in
Yes.
hand as well, right? Like you have the particular framework or skeleton key, but there's also going to be the way that the text is elucidated and illuminated, and that you illuminate the text with your own given background and your own given particularity. You know,
I
um,
think activation is a co-laboring.
absolutely, absolutely,
But a good, but the thing is, there are certain books that activate you because you feel like you can
yeah,
participate in them and
mhm,
involved in them, and that you have something to bear on them. But I do think there are books like The Sound and the Fury that have a higher probability of doing that to 30 students in the room versus just one, right?
mm, mm,
That actually do they're better at spreading than others, right?
mhm,
There are certain methods, there are certain ways of teaching that are more likely to make 30 people in a room feel like they can get themselves involved in a subject versus just one. So, for example, okay, I think a way that you can get people really interested, I know we're running out of time, but interested in physics is, instead of, say, talking about string theory and teaching what is string theory, you say there's currently a debate between string theory and quantum gravity, and scientists disagree on the reality of time. You introduce the debate and the
yeah,
disagreement,
yeah,
because right there, that's like, well, what do you guys think? These people, they don't agree, right? So the moment
yeah, yeah,
we don't tend to teach subjects
no,
leading with the cutting edge disagreement. We tend to teach historic disagreements like Einstein and Newton.
hmm,
You should start, in my very strong opinion, high schoolers, middle schoolers, any schooler should
yeah.
be brought into a field being taught the cutting edge debate right now.
Well, and that's nuance, and that's also, what do you think, or what do you observe?
It's way
And
more
that's
likely to
it's
activate them because
absolutely
they're
because
like,
I'm
it's
like, wait,
not.
I can
If
I
I
can speak on
introduce
this. I can. Oh
physics
my
is
gosh,
physics is usually taught to kids as if it's a sealed box, as if
one
it's
thousand
finished,
percent.
and they have nothing to say on it. But if I
Mhm,
say this is a cutting edge debate where
mhm,
there's a debate on the reality of
mhm,
time,
mhm,
there are people that think time is real, other people think time isn't real, it's relative to space.
mhm,
This really matters.
mhm,
These are the implications of, if time isn't real relative to space, you go to string theory. Time, space, Kaufman, other people, right? This is what we're going to be. Lee Smolin, et cetera, so forth. The stakes are very. This is the debate. Well, if it's a debate, that means it's unfinished.
mhm.
So there's some possibility of me having a contribution to it.
Yes,
That's the key.
yes.
You activate people regarding that which they feel like they might be able to
Mhm,
contribute to,
mhm.
or bring something to bear on. I can't be activated towards something that's finished. There's nothing to be done, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
you lead fields like history. There are giant debates Oh, there's a huge debate right now on World War II.
Mhm.
You introduce that debate,
Yeah.
and then go, oh, okay,
Mhm.
interesting. You teach the debate.
Yeah, well, that's
You don't, okay, here's the other thing. You don't do this nonsense. A lot of times you have kids take sides of the debate. No, throw them into the middle of the debate. Like, don't have them take sides
well,
of the
and
debate because
that's
there's no thing. They need to
yes,
learn
yes.
and memorize the side of the debate, not throw them in the middle and think the debate. You understand? There's a
Wait, you're
difference
saying
between the metaxis of the
do you throw
debate.
them in the middle?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
because otherwise they're just memorizing a side. It's a fake debate.
Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
debate is
Yeah.
when they're in the middle of the debate and they realize that neither side knows.
Yeah.
Then now there's something to activate them. You can't activate people if there's not something unfinished. Because if it's unfinished or it's not done, well, then there's stakes
Yeah.
and there's something I can do. It's the same like you can do this in music because not every possible song in the universe has been written yet, right?
Yeah.
And there's a feeling of exploration and
Yeah, yeah.
improvisation.
Maybe that's why it's more like if there's a greater likelihood that you see activation when it comes to creative topics,
Absolutely.
where people
Absolutely.
get like,
Because it's unfinished.
yeah.
So there's a reason to be there's something to activate me. You
Yeah.
can't be activated by something finished.
What about people who just really like who are repelled by creativity because they're like, I don't know what to do. So they like the like, I know what the answers are. There is a
Yeah,
right and wrong
that's
answer.
yes. I mean, you were
Is
speaking earlier about a form of activation that seems bad, right? I guess I want to make distinction between using the internet for enjoyment and kind of the liaisons kind of
oh, I
thing
see. Yeah,
versus
yeah.
activation seems different to me. I think a lot of people use the internet for enjoyment or distraction or
Hmm.
avoiding psychological, analytical challenges, right?
Right.
Activation is when you are driven or you always have something to do
Hmm.
and it's not psychoanalytically deficient,
Hmm.
right? So likewise, yeah, people can absolutely enjoy the neurotic, the formal, the system, and all of those different things. And again, maybe you can get through life without activation and be perfectly fine and happy and so on and so forth. We talked
Right.
about that. I would not invest my life portfolio that way.
Yeah.
I would not do that, especially given our particular historical moment.
Right.
But you could, and yeah, sure, you might get lucky, but I don't think it's a good bet right now.
Mhm.
But yeah, a lot of people do like not having creativity. But in a world of
Well,
technological advancement and speed and all of that, creativity becomes a matter of life and death
yeah.
because you're going to deal with the unexpected.
Yeah. True. I mean, that's what I guess I was just trying to think of like what could activation look like that is um I don't know. I guess for me, yeah, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's almost to say that when you're having this, here's the questions, here's the answers. In a way, again, there might be a place for that, right? You need people to
Mm,
just be able to do simple, like those
mm,
simple tasks, right?
mhm,
That just need to get done
mhm.
because, um, but at the same time, they still go home at night and have relations, and
Yeah,
then how are they able to be activated
yeah.
in their relational
I would
capacity, et cetera?
wager that if you lack activation, relationship will be a struggle.
Oh yeah,
That's
yeah,
always what
yeah,
psychoanalysis warns, in my opinion. I mean, here also, there's a distinction between sleeping and Gurdjieff, as Luke will say, being awake. Activation
Mhm.
seems to be waking up. Like,
Yes,
how do you
yes.
wake up? Which is tied to the possibility of becoming a saint as
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
right? I do think, I guess the overall point is that considering this distinction between I would also say like distinctions itself can activate people. Like when you hear the distinction between activation and teaching, you're like, yeah, I've noticed that. I've seen that. Because
Yeah.
what are you doing? You're remembering. It turns so here's when you hear a useful distinction,
Yes.
there's something where you remember your experiences and there's a through line.
Mhm,
There's a coherence to them. It's
mhm,
not just collecting. There was something unifying them
mhm.
all together.
Like the members of your body
Yeah,
that you're
you
remembering.
remember, you
Yeah.
re-put them together, you gather them, right? So there's this moment where a great distinction brings back your life experiences to you in a manner that then makes them intelligible. It creates a through
Through
line.
line. Yeah.
And if
A
they can, and if
continuity, a
yeah, a
continuity.
continuity. If through lines are possible, you're activated because reality can consist of through lines.
Yeah.
And I want more through lines. I want more through lines
Yeah.
because that creates a way where the person is put together and capable of developing in ways they otherwise couldn't. I think activation and through lines are tied together.
Mhm.
Like teaching is where you're able to bring out what you need for your job or whatever, but there's not a through line necessarily. But there's something about activation that is through line, gestalt, insight, all of that different
Mhm.
stuff. And a good teacher, I think, is one who knows which books and which articulations increase the highest probability that students will grasp a through line through literature or
Mhm.
a through line through physics. And
Mhm.
paradoxically, I think introducing the cutting edge debate increases the probability of grasping the through line
Mhm.
actually,
Mhm.
because you see how it was all leading to this. You kind
Yeah.
of see
Yeah.
how it, you see where it was all going, and then you see the through line is actually open ended,
Mhm.
so it's exciting and interesting,
Yeah.
right? So I do think there are ways and methodologies to increase the probability of activation.
Yeah, no, that's all very good, and I agree with that. And I think again, that's I was going to loop it back to that again with articulation because, um, again, when you make a distinction of words, then it can help people see the again the through line, have that remembering sort of thing that happens. Um, yeah, I guess just something that was also coming to mind. I don't know. I keep like in my brain thinking about okay, well, um, that's great that this book activated you and you could if you there is an ability to discern that this might book may have a higher chance of activating others. um I mean, is it as simple as that? Because there's a part of me that's almost like, well, what if somebody like would like to be able to activate and they're just like, which book, which one? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, I guess for me, I do think there's something interesting because in the mode of activation, I do think there's a lot more like it's almost like, of course it's this book. Like it's not even like a you know that it's this book because well, first of all, it was something that activated you, and second of all, um, anyways, I guess I'm
Well,
just
well,
speaking
I
to
should
that.
clarify
Okay,
as well that it's not merely The Sound and the Fury. It's because anyone could pick it up at the library and be like, "This is nonsense." It's your ability to articulate The Sound and the Fury to another person, right?
fair,
So
and
you
that's
it
why
has to have
it
the
is.
co-laboring.
Yeah, exactly. It is the what, but it's also the how so much. And also, there's
But that would mean that you like, for example, what a teacher should do is look at the books that they've read and be like, which of these books can I
in my own life.
articulate in my own life that
Is
I've
that it?
read,
Okay.
could I articulate in a way where the student will grasp the simple,
Yes, like the
right?
skeleton key,
The
right?
skeleton key. Which of these books? Is it Flannery O'Connor? Is it Hemingway? Is it Faulkner? And you run through yourself. Well, I think it's Faulkner. Why? You say, okay, because it's the Sound of Fury seems like nonsense when you read it, right? But actually, there's an extraordinary logic of association in Benji, and each one of these sections takes on the way of experience that the character takes on. So
Hmm.
I, with this book, can suddenly make nonsense intelligible. And that moment of the experience of a student going from seeing something as nonsense to seeing it as coherent
Hmm.
is a kind of magical moment
Hmm. Hmm.
that once they experience and know is possible in life, it will change how they experience all
Yeah,
things,
yeah,
right? So you teach that book.
yeah. And that's not to say that there's not some other book out there
Another person, they
that
might be able to do it with Hemingway. But the
right.
key
But
that I
that's
do
what a
want to say,
particular
there's a
yeah,
shared form.
yeah, yeah.
Like
Oh yeah.
what the teacher, the key move that occurs, I think, is you give the student a sort of phenomenological experience.
Yes, absolutely.
What book can you introduce to someone that will seem like nonsense or like it's stupid or not saying anything, that right in front of their eyes, without
You can
changing
change
any of the
alchemy.
words,
That's like
you can change it into a masterpiece?
yeah.
That is
Well,
what you want to give to the student, not because your main goal is to teach them the sound and the fury, because your main goal is to make them experience that moment of nonsense turning into a masterpiece. That is your goal.
Mm,
That's the activation. The
mm.
phenomenology is the activation.
Yes.
More than the sound and the fury,
Sure, sure.
it's the phenomenology of that nonsense masterpiece.
Yeah.
Boring, engaging,
Yes.
you know, boom, and you it happens right in front of you with nothing changing.
Mhm.
That changes all of reality. Like you're so a magic trick, okay? You're trying to do a magic trick.
Yeah.
Um, when you have the experience, I think people who are activated have had the experience of something change right in front of their eyes
Yes.
without changing.
Exactly. Exactly.
And once you realize that can happen,
Yes.
then every phenomenon in your life is different.
Yes.
So you're activated to treat everything differently.
Yes.
So
And it,
that's what you want to focus on as the teacher.
hmm, and that's why ideas articulation
You
matters
must
so
philosophize your life.
much.
You
Yeah,
can't do
you
that
can't
without
do that without
philosophy.
philosophy.
Yeah, because philosophy makes the immediate in that which is in front of you strange again.
Hmm.
Like as
Hmm.
Leibniz said, philosophy is about making the ordinary strange again,
Hmm.
right? So what you're able to like philosophy is how you figure out how to
Mhm.
take nonsense and make it a masterpiece
Mhm.
to someone else,
Mhm.
not just yourself. But you have to philosophize your life
Yes.
if there's going to be any hope of philosophizing someone else's.
Yes. Yes.
But for more,
Yes.
for more, ogrose.com,
Yes.
X, Spotify, Amazon, all purchases and reviews are greatly appreciated. And
Yes.
thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, guys.